There is a specific moment in adulthood when someone wakes up and does not completely recognize the reflection in the mirror. It is not their physical appearance that has changed. It is their eyes. There is something in them that was not there before. A fatigue that cannot be resolved with sleep. A question that has no name. A weight that seems to have settled somewhere between the chest and the throat. It's as if life has become a movie without a script, where each scene happens without connection to the previous one. Decisions that seemed obvious have turned into mazes. Dreams that gave direction have become blurred memories. And there is this persistent feeling that something fundamental has been lost along the way. But there is no going back to look for it. There is a word for this. A word that carries within it centuries of human confusion, of desperate attempts to find someone to blame for what we cannot control. A word that, when spoken, makes the whole body recognize what it already knew but had never dared to name. Disaster. Not the disaster of movies, explosions, natural catastrophes, tragedies that come from outside. The intimate disaster. The one that happens slowly, almost without warning, until one day someone looks around and realizes that the life they are living is not the life they imagined living, that the choices they made brought them to a place they don't recognize, that there is an abysmal distance between who they always were and who they have become. And the question that won't go away, when did it all start to fall apart? When did the feeling of being in control turn into this feeling of being adrift, without a compass, without a map, without a destination? There is an answer to that question, an answer that will not ease the discomfort. On the contrary, it will intensify it. But it may reveal something fundamental about the nature of this intimate disaster, something that the ancient Greeks intuited, that Shakespeare questioned, and that a German philosopher turned into one of the most disturbing and liberating ideas in the history of thought. The answer lies in the origin of the word, because sometimes to understand where we are, we first need to understand where we came from. When we don't know where we're going, we blame the stars. The word disaster comes from the Latin dis and astrum, without a star, or, in a more cruel translation, lost, without celestial guidance, abandoned by the gods. The ancient Greeks had an intimate relationship with the night sky. For them, each constellation was a map, each star a promise of direction. When someone got lost, literally or metaphorically, the explanation was simple. The stars were not favorable. Fate was against them. Cosmic forces were conspiring. It was, in a way, comforting. Because if disaster came from the stars, the responsibility was not human. If life was not going well, it was the fault of the stars. If someone felt lost, it was because the universe had decided to withdraw its guidance. Imagine the feeling, waking up on any given morning and feeling that nothing makes sense. The projects that seemed important now sound empty. Relationships that provided stability now feel like obligations. The routine that offered security now suffocates like a prison. For the Greeks, this meant one thing: cosmic bad luck. The stars were out of alignment. There is a perverse beauty in this explanation, because when we blame the stars, we don't have to look inward. We don't have to question our choices, our standards, our way of building a life. Disaster comes from outside, so the solution must also come from outside. We wait for something to change in the world so that something can change in us. We inherited this logic, we just changed the names. When life falls apart, we still look for something external to blame. The system, society, family, capitalism, technology, others. It is always something bigger than us, something beyond our control, something that justifies our sense of powerlessness. And it is not difficult to find culprits. The modern world offers a multitude of targets: the speed of urban life, social media, market competitiveness, the superficiality of relationships. Any of these factors can bear responsibility for our malaise. Any one of them can be the misaligned star of our time. There is a perverse comfort in this transfer, because if we are not to blame, we are also powerless. If we are victims of circumstances, we do not need to take responsibility for changing anything. We can settle into the position of those who suffer unjustly, those who have been betrayed by fate. Shakespeare, with the cruel genius that only he possessed, captured this human tendency in a phrase that should be engraved in the conscience of every person who has ever felt lost. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars but in ourselves. What a brutal translation of the human condition. What a direct confrontation with our desperate need to find external culprits. But Shakespeare was writing for fictional characters. In real life, this realization is much harder to bear, because if the fault is not in the stars, if disaster does not come from outside, then where does it come from? And more importantly, what do we do with this information? The answer is more disturbing than any horoscope could predict. Because there is a fundamental difference between feeling lost because of circumstances and discovering that perhaps you have always been lost. You just didn't have the courage to admit it. between believing that disaster is temporary, something that will pass when the stars align, and confronting the possibility that disaster is not an event but a state. That's what happens in adulthood. It's not that things start to go wrong. It's that we begin to realize that maybe they were never really right, that we've always been sailing without a compass, just pretending we knew the way, that the feeling of control was an illusion carefully constructed to avoid confrontation with emptiness. Think about the last time you felt this existential vertigo. It wasn't after some external tragedy. It was in an ordinary moment, perhaps while drinking your morning coffee, when suddenly your whole life seemed artificial, as if you were actors playing a role you never chose, following a script you never read. This realization does not come like a bolt from the blue. It creeps in slowly, like a crack in the wall that grows imperceptibly until one day it can no longer be ignored. First, there are small discomforts. A meeting that seems absurd, a conversation that sounds empty, a Sunday that drags on without purpose. Then these moments multiply, connect, and form a pattern that we can no longer deny. The etymology of the word disaster is not just a linguistic curiosity, it is a mirror, because it reveals something fundamental about how human beings deal with the feeling of being lost, by transferring responsibility, first to the stars, then to anything that allows us to maintain the illusion that we are victims of circumstances, never authors of our choices. But what if we are not victims? What if we are in fact solely responsible for creating the feeling of disaster? What if what we call being lost is actually refusing to take ownership of our own existence? This possibility is terrifying, because it means that there is no one to save. There is no star that will magically align and put everything in its place. There is no system that, if changed, will solve the inner emptiness. There are no external circumstances that, if altered, will restore the lost meaning. It means that inner disaster is, paradoxically, an inner creation. That the feeling of being lost may actually be the only true clue we have about who we really are when we stop pretending we know what we are doing. And that is exactly what a 19th century German philosopher realized when he looked at the human condition and proposed the most cruel and liberating experiment in the history of philosophy. If you had to live it all over again, exactly the same. Friedrich Nietzsche had a habit of walking in the Swiss mountains when his most disturbing ideas were born. It was during one of these walks, in 1881, that a question struck him like a bolt of lightning. What if the life we live is just the first rehearsal of a play we have to perform over and over again? He turned this intuition into a thought experiment that should come with a warning. Caution, this idea may permanently alter your relationship with your own existence. Imagine that one night, while lying in bed, a demon appears in your room. Not the demon from horror movies, something more subtle, more cruel. He approaches you and whispers, "This life you are living now, you will have to live it once more, and then once more, and once more, infinitely. Every moment of pain, every instant of boredom, every decision that brought you here, everything exactly the same, in the same order with the same intensity." The demon continues. Every Sunday that drags on without purpose, every Monday that weighs like a sentence, every empty conversation you endure, every night you lie down feeling that the day has been wasted, all of this will repeat itself eternally. There is no way to change a single comma in the script. Faced with this revelation, Nietzsche asks, would you gnash your teeth and curse the demon? Or would you take a deep breath and thank him for showing you the truth? The question is not theoretical. It is an existential scalpel that cuts straight to the core of our relationship with life, because it forces a brutal confrontation. If you knew you had to relive your existence exactly as it is over and over again, would you still choose to live it? The answer reveals something devastating about the modern condition. Most of us would gnash our teeth. Most of us would be horrified at the prospect of repeating our own days over and over again. And that means something terrible. We are living a life we couldn't bear to live twice. Think about your routine over the last few months. The mornings when you wake up with that heavy feeling in your chest, the days that pass like a fog, the nights when you lie down with the impression that nothing really happened. If a demon appeared now and told you that you would have to relive all of this forever, what would your honest reaction be? If the idea horrifies you, Nietzsche would say that you have discovered something fundamental. You are not living, you are merely existing. You are not creating a life, you are serving a sentence. And worse, it is a sentence you wrote yourself, choice by choice, commitment by commitment, surrender by surrender. The experiment of eternal return is not about life after death or reincarnation. It is about life before life, about waking up to the fact that maybe we never really started living. It's about realizing that we have turned existence into a series of automatic movements, conditioned responses, days that repeat themselves not because they are eternal, but because they are empty. There is a brilliant cruelty in this idea, because it offers no consolation, no promise that things will get better, no blame for external circumstances. It simply asks, would you approve of the life you're living if you knew it was the only one you had? And here lies the most disturbing twist. Maybe that's exactly what's happening. Maybe every day is in fact an endless repetition of the same internal pattern. Maybe we wake up every day to live the same emotional life, the same fears, the same escapes, the same little daily deaths. If you stop to observe, and I invite you to do so in the coming days, you will realize that even when circumstances change, something in us remains exactly the same. Work changes, but the feeling of emptiness at work remains. Relationships change, but the way we relate to others remains the same. The city changes, but the feeling of not belonging anywhere persists. It's as if we were already living in an eternal return, only we didn't have the courage to admit it. As if each day were an infinite repetition of the same inner day, disguised as novelty by superficial changes in circumstances. Nietzsche's demon does not need to appear in the room. He is already here, whispering every morning, "You will live this day exactly as you lived yesterday and as you will live tomorrow, forever." And we, instead of horror or gratitude, feel only the anesthesia of those who have become accustomed to their own prison. But there is a third possibility that Nietzsche did not mention directly, but which is hidden between the lines of the experiment. What if the demon's question was actually an invitation to start living a life worth repeating? When the world gets too serious for our ideas, there is a silent violence in modernity that is rarely named, the death of the ability to play with one's own existence. Not childish play, but that creative lightness that allows us to imagine pterodactyls drinking tea without feeling guilty for thinking nonsense while the world falls apart. This violence does not come as external censorship. It infiltrates as an inner voice that whispers, "How can you create something frivolous when there is so much suffering in the world? How can you laugh when others are crying? How can you imagine when you should be solving real problems?" And so, slowly, creativity becomes hostage to the compulsory seriousness of the times. As if existing creatively were a privilege we don't deserve, a selfish indulgence in the face of collective tragedies. This creative guilt is one of the most refined symptoms of modern paralysis. Because it doesn't attack directly. It whispers that we are conscious, responsible people, too mature to waste time with imagination. It convinces us that creativity is escapism, that lightness is insensitivity, that having useless ideas is a sign of moral frivolity. The result is devastating. We become strangers to our own imagination. We begin to censor thoughts before they even fully form. We develop a preemptive guilt that kills ideas in their infancy, as if we were protecting the world from our inadequate imaginations. But there is something deeper going on here. Creative paralysis isn't just about creating art or having original ideas. It's about the fundamental ability to imagine that life could be different than it is. It's about keeping alive the possibility that we aren't doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over again. When we lose our creative lightness, we also lose the ability to reinvent ourselves. Because creating isn't just about producing something new in the world. It's about producing something new in ourselves. It is exercising the existential muscles that allow us to say, what if I were different? What if my life were different? What if everything were different? Creative guilt is in fact fear of freedom, because creating means admitting that we have choices. It means recognizing that we are not completely determined by circumstances, that there is a spark of autonomy within us that can generate something unexpected. And that is terrifying. Because if we can create, if we can imagine, if we can play with the possibilities of existence, then we are not passive victims of the world. We are co-authors of our reality. And that means that the life we couldn't bear to live twice may be in part our own creation. Creative paralysis acts as a shield against this perception. It keeps us in the comfortable position of those who can do nothing because they have no right to imagine alternatives. It justifies our passivity with a twisted morality. We are good people because we do not create. We are conscious because we do not imagine. We are responsible because we do not play. But Nietzsche knew that this compulsive seriousness was itself a form of disaster, a form of starless existence disguised as virtue. Because when we refuse to create, when we kill our imaginative lightness, we are refusing the only thing that can take us out of the endless repetition of the same days. Creation is the antidote to mechanical eternal return, not in the sense of escaping reality, but of transforming it, to introduce elements that did not exist before, perspectives, possibilities, ways of being that can break the cycle of automatic repetition. Those who feel guilty for imagining a pterodactyl drinking tea are not being irresponsible in the face of the world's suffering. They are exercising the only human capacity that can eventually generate unexpected solutions to that suffering. They are keeping alive the possibility that not everything has to be the way it has always been. Creative paralysis is a symptom of a greater existential paralysis, the inability to imagine that we can be the authors of our own lives. And perhaps that is precisely where the way out of disaster lies, not in solving all the world's problems, but in regaining the courage to imagine that we are not condemned to repeat them forever. Because there is a fundamental difference between those who accept eternal return out of resignation and those who accept it out of creation. The former repeat because they see no alternative. The latter repeat because they have chosen each moment as if it were a work of art worth contemplating over and over again. The terrible and liberating responsibility of being the author of one's own existence. There is a specific moment in the game Undertale. Perhaps you are familiar with it, when the character approaches a mirror at the end of the journey. After everything that has happened, after all the choices made, a simple message appears. Despite everything, it's still you. This phrase carries a devastating truth about the human condition. Because no matter how many times we blame the stars, no matter how many demons appear whispering about eternal returns, no matter how much the world conspires to make us forget who we are, in the end, when we look in the mirror, we are still us. It's a realization that may seem obvious, but it hides within it the most radical insight a human being can have. You are simultaneously the prisoner and the jailer of your own existence, the author and the main character, the actor and the director. And that is, at the same time, the worst and the best news anyone can receive. The worst news because it means there is no external salvation. There is no star that will magically align to solve your inner disaster. There is no political revolution that will cure your existential void. There is no technology that will restore your lost meaning. There is no therapist, guru, self-help book, or philosophy that will do the work for you. The best news because it means you are not condemned to repeat the same patterns over and over again. If you are the one writing the script, even if unconsciously, then you are the one who can rewrite it. If you are the one who chooses how to react to the demon of eternal return, then you are the one who can transform horror into gratitude. But here lies the cruel complexity of adult existence. Taking on this responsibility is not a single heroic definitive act. It is a choice that must be made every day, every moment, in every small decision that shapes the fabric of personal reality. It is choosing to get up when your body tells you to stay down. It is choosing to create when your inner voice whispers that it is a waste of time. It is choosing to be present when it would be easier to numb yourself. It is choosing to look in the mirror and acknowledge, despite everything, I am still me, and that means I can start over. Nietzsche knew that this realization does not come with an instruction manual. There is no protocol for becoming the author of your own life. There is no guaranteed method for turning disaster into a work of art. There is only the courage to wake up every morning and consciously choose the actions that will make up another day of the only existence we have. And maybe that's exactly what he meant by eternal return. Not that we will literally relive the same life over and over again, but that each day is an opportunity to live as if it were eternal, to make choices that are worth repeating, to create moments that deserve to be immortal. Because there is a huge difference between repeating life out of inertia and repeating it by choice. Between living the same day because we can't imagine another and living the same day because it's exactly the day we want to live forever. Creative paralysis dissolves when we realize that life itself is a creative act. That we don't need to produce works of art to be artists, we just need to treat our existence as a work in progress, as something that deserves attention, care, intention. Intimate disaster does not disappear with this realization. It transforms. It ceases to be something that happens to us and becomes something we do. It ceases to be a curse of the stars and becomes building material for a life worth living and reliving over and over again. When we look in the mirror now, the image may be the same, but the recognition is different. It is no longer, how did I get here? It is, what am I going to do from now on? It is no longer, why is this happening to me? It is, how can I transform this into something I consciously choose? And deep down, maybe that's what we've always known but never had the courage to admit. That we are solely responsible for creating a life we don't need to run away from. That we are the only ones capable of transforming each day into a little eternity worth living. Despite everything, the circumstances, the difficulties, the limitations, the pain, we are still us. And that's not a condemnation. It's an infinite possibility disguised as a mirror. What about you? When was the last time you looked in the mirror and thought, despite everything, I'm still me? With gratitude, not resignation? Tell us in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.